Hello guys, Dr. Spooks here. If you enjoy my videos, please click the like button. It's the only way YouTube's algorithm really notices me. I would be very grateful to you. Alright, so I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here we go. Me and my buddy Jake are into all sorts of creepy stuff. We love exploring old abandoned places and getting that adrenaline rush. We've checked out abandoned factories, ghost towns, all that. But nothing prepared us for what we found that night while browsing the dark web. So, Jake and I were hanging out one night, just scrolling through the usual sites. We had heard rumors about this part of the dark web where people posted locations that were too dangerous or weird for regular urban explorers. After a bit of searching, we found this blog. It had the usual creepy places. But then we saw this post about an abandoned circus. This circus had been shut down for decades, and people said it was haunted. But the freaky part was that a lot of people had gone missing there over the years. Naturally, we were curious. I mean, who wouldn't be? So we decided to check it out. We packed our gear, flashlights, cameras, some snacks, and our crowbars, and took off in Jake's old Jeep. The circus was about an hour away, and as we got closer, everything got real eerie. The landscape was full of overgrown fields, rusty fences, and the occasional old farmhouse that looked like it hadn't been lived in for years. It was like we were driving straight into a horror movie. When we finally got to the entrance, it was even worse than we thought. The gate was all rusted and twisted. There were these old faded banners flapping in the wind. We parked and started walking in, and every step we took just felt wrong. The main tent was huge, but it was all ripped and torn. The rides were still there, but they were covered in rust and peeling paint. It was dead silent, but you could almost hear the echoes of what it used to be. Kids laughing, music playing. Now it was just creepy as hell. As we got closer to the main tent, we saw some old posters on a wall. They were all of clowns, but not the fun kind. These clowns looked evil, and underneath each clown was a name. We realized these were the names of people who had gone missing, some of them from decades ago. "Dude, this is seriously messed up," Jake said, and I could tell he was getting freaked out. "Yeah, but we've come this far. Let's at least take a look inside," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. We went into the main tent, and the smell hit us first. It was moldy and rotten. There were rows of old wooden benches, and in the center, there was a life-sized clown mannequin with this creepy smile. We were just looking around when we heard this clinking sound. It was faint, but it was there, echoing through the tent. "Maybe it's just an animal," I said, but even I didn't believe it. "Yeah, maybe," Jake said, looking just as nervous as I felt. We followed the sound to this smaller tent. It was half collapsed and covered in grime. We had to squeeze through the entrance, and inside it was like an old maintenance area. There were tools and equipment everywhere, all covered in dust. In the corner, there was this big rusted cage, and inside the cage was a clown. But this wasn't a mannequin. It was a real man, dressed in a clown outfit, and his face was painted in this grotesque way. "Help me," he croaked. His voice was so hoarse and desperate. "Please, you have to help me." We just stood there frozen. How long had he been in there? Who put him there? Before we could even think about what to do, we heard footsteps outside. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. They were coming closer. Jake and I exchanged a panicked glance. We had to get out of there. Now. We bolted for the entrance, but 3 figures stepped out of the shadows and blocked our way. They were dressed in dark, tattered clothes, and they had clown masks on. One of them was holding a big, blood-stained machete. "Look what we have here," the leader said, his voice full of malice. "Fresh meat." My heart was pounding. This wasn't just an abandoned circus. This was a trap, and we were caught in it. So there we were, standing in this creepy tent, facing these guys in clown masks. My heart was pounding like crazy, and I knew we were in deep trouble. The leader with the machete stepped forward, grinning under his mask. "You two picked the wrong night to go exploring," he said, his voice cold. Jake and I exchanged a quick look, silently agreeing that we needed to get out of there fast. We backed away slowly, trying to think of a plan. The guys in the clown masks started moving closer, cutting off our escape routes. "Run!" I shouted, and we bolted in different directions. I sprinted through the maze of tents and old rides, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear footsteps behind me getting closer. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running, weaving through the debris and trying to find a way out. I stumbled into another tent, hoping to lose them, but it was a dead end. There were old props and costumes strewn everywhere. I hid behind a pile of junk, trying to catch my breath and think of my next move. The footsteps stopped outside the tent. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't come in. After what felt like an eternity, I heard them move on, their footsteps fading into the distance. I waited a few more minutes to be sure they were gone before I crept out of my hiding spot. My hands were shaking, and my heart was still racing. I needed to find Jake and get out of there. Carefully, I made my way back through the tents, keeping to the shadows and listening for any sounds. I finally found Jake hiding behind an old ticket booth. He looked as freaked out as I felt. "Are you okay?" I whispered. "Yeah, I think so," he replied. "We need to get back to the Jeep." We moved cautiously, trying to stay hidden and avoid making any noise. The whole place felt like a maze, and it was hard to tell which way was out. Every sound made us jump, but we kept going. Eventually, we spotted the entrance gate in the distance. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. One of the clown-masked guys was standing guard near the gate, his machete glinting in the dim light. We ducked behind a broken ride, trying to come up with a plan. "We can't just walk up to him," Jake whispered. "He'll see us for sure." I looked around, trying to find anything that could help us. My eyes landed on a pile of old fireworks near the ride. An idea formed in my head. "What if we create a distraction?" I suggested. "We could set off the fireworks and make a run for it." Jake nodded. "It's worth a shot." We carefully crept over to the fireworks and set them up. Jake found an old lighter in his pocket and handed it to me. My hands were still shaking, but I managed to light the fuse. We backed away quickly, hiding behind the ride again. The fireworks exploded with a deafening bang, lighting up the sky. The guy at the gate turned towards the noise, distracted by the sudden commotion. This was our chance. We sprinted towards the gate, not looking back. The fireworks kept going off, covering our escape. We made it to the Jeep, and Jake fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as much as mine. Finally, he got the door open, and we jumped in. "Go, go, go!" I yelled. Jake started the engine, and we tore out of there, the tires kicking up gravel. We didn't stop driving until we were miles away, back in the safety of town. Only then did we let ourselves breathe. We sat in the Jeep, trying to calm down. "What the hell was that?" Jake said, his voice shaking. "I don't know," I replied, "but we're never going back there again." After that terrifying night at the circus, Jake and I tried to put it behind us. We agreed not to tell anyone what happened. Who would believe us anyway? We decided to lay low and avoid any more crazy adventures. For a while it worked, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. At first I thought it was just paranoia, the lingering fear from our encounter. But then weird things started happening. I'd noticed strange cars parked near my house, unfamiliar faces in the neighborhood, and random calls where no one would speak on the other end. I knew Jake was feeling it too. We didn't talk about it much, but every time I saw him, he looked more on edge. One night, a couple of weeks after our circus visit, I came home to find my front door slightly ajar. My heart sank, I knew I had locked it. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open, slowly stepping inside. Everything looked normal, but there was this uneasy silence. I checked every room, every closet, but nothing seemed out of place. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. I called Jake. "Hey man, something's not right. I think someone's been in my house." "Are you serious?" he replied, sounding worried. "I've been getting that feeling too. We need to figure this out." We decided to meet at a local diner, somewhere public where we could talk without feeling too paranoid. As we sat in a corner booth, we tried to piece together what was happening. "Do you think those guys from the circus are after us?" Jake asked, his voice low. "I don't know," I said, feeling frustrated. "But it seems like too much of a coincidence. We need to be careful." We made a pact to stay vigilant and keep in close contact. We also agreed to keep an eye out for anything unusual and report back to each other. It felt like we were being hunted, and we needed to be prepared for anything. A few days later, Jake called me in a panic. "Dude, they broke into my house. I found clown masks and some of my stuff missing. We need to do something." "All right, come over to my place. We'll figure this out together," I replied, trying to stay calm. When Jake arrived, he was visibly shaken. We talked through our options and decided it was time to involve the police, even though we knew it sounded crazy. We gathered the evidence we had, the masks, the strange incidents, and went to the local precinct. The officers listened, but I could tell they were skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Two guys claiming they were being hunted by a killer clown organization. It sounded like a bad horror movie. They took our statements and the evidence, but I could see in their eyes they didn't take us seriously. Leaving the station, Jake and I felt more alone than ever. If the police wouldn't help us, we were on our own. We decided to take matters into our own hands. We started researching the circus and the missing people, trying to find any connection that could help us. We spent hours combing through old newspapers, online forums, and any other resources we could find. It was slow and frustrating work, but we were determined to get to the bottom of this. One night, while digging through an old forum, I stumbled upon a post from years ago. It was from a woman whose brother had gone missing near the circus. She mentioned strange sightings of clowns in the area and how the police had dismissed her concerns. She had done her own investigation and believed there was a hidden group operating out of the circus, luring people in and making them disappear. I showed it to Jake, and we knew we had to reach out to her. If she was still around, she might have more information. We tracked her down on social media and sent her a message, explaining our situation and asking for her help. To our surprise, she responded quickly. She was wary at first, but agreed to meet us in person. We arranged to meet at a busy cafe, hoping the public setting would make it safer. When we met her, she seemed cautious but willing to talk. She told us about her brother and the years she had spent trying to find out what happened to him. Her story was eerily similar to ours. People disappearing, strange sightings, and no one believing her. "These people, whoever they are, they're dangerous," she warned us. "You need to be very careful. They don't like loose ends." We left the meeting feeling a mix of dread and determination. We weren't alone in this, but we were up against something far bigger and more sinister than we had imagined. Meeting with the woman, whose name was Lisa, gave us a clearer picture of what we were dealing with. She explained how her brother's disappearance was eerily similar to the other cases we had read about. People would go exploring near the circus and just vanish. The authorities always chalked it up to accidents or people running away, but Lisa knew better. She believed a group was using the circus as a hunting ground. "We have to be smart about this," Lisa said. "They're watching us and they won't hesitate to make us disappear if we get too close." Jake and I agreed. We needed a plan, and we needed to be cautious. We decided to gather more evidence before making any moves. Lisa had some old files and notes from her own investigation, so we went through those first. There were reports of strange sightings, people dressed as clowns lurking in the area, and even some eyewitness accounts that sounded disturbingly familiar. One night, as we were poring over the files at my place, Jake suddenly looked up. "We need to go back," he said. "We need to find concrete evidence. Pictures, videos, something undeniable." I hesitated. The thought of going back to that circus made my skin crawl, but he was right. Without solid proof, we were just three people with a crazy story. "Okay," I agreed, "but we go prepared this time. Cameras, backup plans, and we stick together." We spent the next few days gathering everything we needed. We bought better cameras, walkie-talkies, and even some basic self-defense gear. We also mapped out the circus grounds and made a detailed plan of how we'd move through the area. The night we decided to go back was dark and cloudy, perfect for staying hidden. We met up at Lisa's place and drove together to the outskirts of the circus grounds. The place looked even more sinister than before, if that was possible. "Remember, we're here to gather evidence and get out," I reminded everyone as we parked a safe distance away and started walking towards the entrance. No unnecessary risks. We moved quickly and quietly, making our way through the main gate and towards the central tent. The place was just as creepy as before, maybe even more so now that we knew what we were up against. We split up slightly, each of us focusing on different areas to cover more ground. I was in the maintenance tent where we had found the caged man. The cage was still there, but empty now. I took photos and recorded everything, making sure to document every detail. Meanwhile, Jake was in the main tent, focusing on the center ring and the sinister clown mannequin. Lisa was outside, checking the perimeter and looking for any signs of recent activity. Suddenly, I heard a faint noise. It was the same clinking sound we had heard last time. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. I moved towards the sound, careful not to make any noise. The clinking got louder as I approached another tent we hadn't checked before. Inside, I found another cage, but this time it was empty. However, there were fresh bloodstains on the floor. My stomach turned, but I kept filming. I needed to document everything. Then, over the walkie-talkie, I heard Jake's panicked voice. "Guys, they're here. We need to get out now." I grabbed my stuff and bolted out of the tent, running towards the main area where we had planned to meet if things went south. Lisa was already there, her face pale. "We have to go," she said urgently. Jake came sprinting towards us, and behind him I could see the figures in clown masks emerging from the shadows. We didn't wait. We ran as fast as we could towards the car, the masked figures hot on our heels. We made it to the car and Jake fumbled with the keys again, his hands shaking. "Hurry up," Lisa and I shouted, our voices filled with panic. Finally, he got the car started and we sped away, leaving the circus behind once more. Back at Lisa's place, we reviewed the footage. It was chilling. We had enough evidence to prove something seriously wrong was happening at that circus. We agreed it was time to go to the police again, this time with undeniable proof. As we prepared our case, we knew we had to be careful. We were dealing with dangerous people who wouldn't hesitate to silence us, but we couldn't let them get away with it. We had to bring the truth to light no matter the risk. With the footage in hand, we were determined to take this to the police. We gathered everything we had, photos, videos, Lisa's notes, and our own written accounts. We needed to make sure they couldn't dismiss us this time. We called the police station and asked to meet with a detective, emphasizing the urgency of our situation. When we arrived, the detective we met with was skeptical. He watched the footage, his expression unchanged. By the end, he shook his head. "This is disturbing, but it's not enough. The quality is poor and it's hard to identify anyone. Without clearer evidence or witnesses, there's not much we can do." My heart sank. "You can't be serious," Jake protested. "People are in danger." The detective sighed. "I believe you, but we need more to go on. Keep an eye out and stay safe, but without solid proof our hands are tied." Leaving the station, we felt defeated. We had risked everything to gather this evidence, and it wasn't enough. The sense of being hunted returned, stronger than ever. We knew those people were still out there, and now they knew we were onto them. We decided to take matters into our own hands. Staying in one place was too dangerous, so we packed up and started moving constantly, never staying in one town for too long. It was the only way we felt remotely safe. The constant moving took its toll. We were always on edge, never able to relax. Every unfamiliar face, every strange car sent us into a panic. We changed our appearance as much as we could, using different names, trying to stay under the radar. But the trauma of that night and the knowledge that those people were still out there haunted us. Lisa, Jake, and I stayed in touch, always checking in on each other. But the stress was immense. Sleep was a rare commodity, and nightmares were frequent visitors. The fear that at any moment we could be found was a constant companion. One night, as we sat in a rundown motel room far from home, Lisa voiced what we were all thinking. "Do you think they're still after us?" Jake shook his head. "I don't know, but I can't live like this forever." We knew we couldn't keep running forever, but the fear kept us moving. We tried to find solace in each other, but it was hard. The sense of betrayal from the authorities, the feeling of being hunted, it all weighed heavily on us. Eventually, we decided to start a blog, anonymously, to warn others. We detailed our story and the dangers of the dark web, hoping to prevent others from making the same mistake. It was a small comfort, knowing we might help someone, but it didn't erase the fear. Years have passed, and we still look over our shoulders. The trauma of that night never left us. We've scattered across the country, staying in touch but living our own lives in the shadows. The dark web is a dangerous place, full of horrors that can follow you into the real world. If our story can teach anything, it's to stay away. Some curiosities aren't worth the risk. Stay safe and trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And remember, some stuff is better left alone. My grandma was always a bit off. Growing up, she would tell me the most bizarre stories, ones that would make my skin crawl. But there was one story that stood out from the rest, one that haunted me long after she finished telling it. It was about a circus she claimed was cursed. She called it the Spectral Circus. Grandma's eyes would glaze over with a mix of fear and nostalgia whenever she spoke of it. She said it rolled into her small town when she was just a girl, setting up shop on the outskirts where the forest meets the river. The townsfolk were excited, as circuses were a rare treat back then. But there was something different about the Spectral Circus. Something wrong. She described the circus as having a dark, eerie atmosphere. The tents were adorned with faded, tattered banners that fluttered in a wind no one could feel. The performers, though talented, had an unsettling aura about them. The ringmaster, a tall, gaunt figure with a permanent sneer, introduced himself as Mr. Malachi. His eyes were cold, calculating, and they seemed to bore into your very soul. Grandma's most vivid memory was of a clown named Giggles. Unlike the cheerful clowns you'd expect, Giggles had a sinister smile that stretched unnaturally across his face. His laughter was hollow, echoing in a way that made it feel like it was coming from everywhere at once. His eyes were black pits that seemed to absorb all light, and his movements were jerky, like a marionette controlled by an inexperienced puppeteer. One night after the show, a few children from the town went missing. Panic spread, and parents kept their kids close. Grandma said she and her friends decided to investigate, Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, they snuck out of their homes and headed to the circus, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they approached, they saw shadows moving in unnatural ways, twisting and contorting as if they had a life of their own. They found Giggles in the center of the main tent, his back turned to them. The air was thick with an acrid metallic scent that made their eyes water. When he turned around, he held a small bloodied shoe in his hand. The sight of it made Grandma's blood run cold. Giggles slowly raised a finger to his lips and let out a soft shh before the tent was suddenly plunged into darkness. The children scattered, running for their lives. Grandma never spoke of what happened to her friends that night, only that she managed to escape, vowing never to speak of the circus again. The next day, the spectral circus was gone, leaving behind only trampled grass and the lingering stench of fear. Years later, as Grandma lay on her deathbed, she took my hand and made me promise to never look for the spectral circus. "It's not just a story," she whispered, her voice frail and quivering. "It's real, and it's evil." I didn't take her seriously at first. It sounded like the ramblings of an old woman whose mind was slipping away. But after she passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was some truth to her words. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started searching for any information I could find about the spectral circus. Google turned up nothing, not even a hint. It was as if the circus had never existed, but Grandma's story gnawed at me. I knew there had to be something out there, some record or mention hidden away. That's when I turned to the darker corners of the internet. The dark web, a place where the most obscure and forbidden information lurked. It took weeks of sifting through forums and cryptic messages before I found a lead. A post, buried deep in a hidden forum, mentioned the spectral circus. It claimed the circus still stood, abandoned but intact, in the same place Grandma described. My heart raced as I read the post. It included coordinates and a warning: enter at your own risk. Some things are better left alone. I knew I shouldn't go, but I felt compelled to see it for myself. I needed to know if Grandma's story was real, or if it was just the product of a fevered imagination. I packed my bags and set out for the remote town where the spectral circus had supposedly appeared all those years ago. The journey was long and arduous, taking me through desolate landscapes and forgotten roads. As I neared the location, an overwhelming sense of dread settled over me. The sky grew darker, and an unnatural stillness enveloped the area. The forest was eerily silent, not even the sound of birds or rustling leaves to break the oppressive quiet. My GPS indicated I was close, and I could see the faded outlines of tents through the trees. I took a deep breath and stepped into the clearing. The sight that greeted me was straight out of a nightmare. The spectral circus stood before me, exactly as Grandma had described. The tents were in a state of decay, the fabric torn and weathered. The once vibrant colors were now dull and lifeless, covered in a thick layer of grime. As I walked through the abandoned circus, I could feel eyes on me, watching my every move. Shadows flickered at the edge of my vision, and I heard faint whispers carried on the wind. I approached the main tent, the largest and most imposing structure. Its entrance yawned open like a gaping maw, inviting me into its dark depths. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but I had come too far to back down now. I stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. The interior was a twisted mockery of a circus, with broken chairs and decaying props scattered about. The smell of rot and decay was overwhelming, making my stomach churn, and then I saw him. Giggles. He stood at the far end of the tent, his back turned to me just as Grandma had described. His costume was tattered, and his white face paint was cracked and peeling. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath in the dim light. Giggles turned slowly, his eyes locking onto mine. That same sinister smile spread across his face, and he began to laugh. The sound was hollow, echoing through the empty tent. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. His laughter grew louder, more manic, and I knew I had to get out of there. I turned and ran, stumbling over debris as I fled the tent. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and I felt something cold brush against my skin. I burst out of the tent and into the forest, not daring to look back. The feeling of being watched intensified, and I knew Giggles was following me. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead, but I kept running, driven by sheer terror. I could hear his laughter behind me, growing closer with each step. I tripped and fell, the rough ground scraping my hands and knees. Desperation surged through me as I scrambled to my feet and continued running. Finally, I saw the edge of the forest, the faint light of dawn breaking through the trees. I burst out of the woods and collapsed onto the grass, gasping for breath. The laughter stopped, and the oppressive feeling lifted. I lay there for what felt like hours, trying to process what had just happened. When I finally mustered the strength to stand, I looked back at the forest. The spectral circus was hidden from view, but I knew it was still there, waiting for its next victim. Grandma's warning echoed in my mind, and I vowed never to speak of what I had seen. But the story doesn't end there. What I found on the dark web, what I experienced at the spectral circus, was just the beginning. And the horrors that awaited me were beyond anything I could have imagined. After coming back from the old circus, I couldn't shake off what I had seen. I mean, seeing Giggles and all those creepy things really messed with my head. I couldn't sleep at night. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see his face and hear his awful laugh. It was like he was in my room watching me, even though I promised myself I wouldn't dig deeper. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I needed to know more. So I went back online, this time diving even deeper into the dark web. I found some forums where people talked about strange and spooky stuff. After a lot of searching, I found a few mentions of the spectral circus. People had their own stories, talking about missing friends and weird happenings. One night I got a message from someone I didn't know. It was anonymous. The message said, "I know what you saw. Meet me at these coordinates if you want answers." It had a location, someplace out in the woods near where I saw the circus. I knew it was probably a bad idea, but I had to know the truth. The drive to the coordinates was creepy. The road was narrow and surrounded by thick woods. I felt like the trees were closing in on me. When I finally got to the spot, I saw a small cabin with a light flickering inside. It looked like something out of a horror movie, but I was already there, so I went in. Inside, the cabin was a mess. Papers were everywhere, and it smelled musty. An old man with wild hair and crazy eyes was there. He told me his name was Harold and that he survived the spectral circus. He had been trying to figure out its secrets for years. Harold showed me an old journal filled with notes and drawings. It belonged to a guy named Samuel, who used to run the circus before Mr. Malachi. According to the journal, Samuel made a deal with a demon to make the circus powerful. But the deal meant the souls of everyone who came to the circus were trapped forever. Harold said the only way to stop the circus was to destroy Mr. Malachi's cane, which was the source of his power. The cane was like a key that kept the demon's magic alive. If we could break it, we could free the souls and end the curse. We spent days getting ready. Harold and I made weapons and gathered supplies. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we had to try. On the night of the new moon, when the circus's power was supposed to be weakest, we went back to the forest. The forest was even scarier than before. It was so dark and the air felt heavy. We sneaked up to the circus, which looked the same as before, all broken and creepy. We headed straight for the main tent where we knew Mr. Malachi would be. Inside, it was even worse. Mr. Malachi was there holding his cane, and Giggles was with him. The whole place felt alive with evil energy. Mr. Malachi saw us and just laughed. He said, "Welcome, brave souls. Come to join the show?" Harold yelled at him, saying we were there to end his evil circus. Mr. Malachi just laughed more, saying we were fools and that the circus would never end. Then Giggles attacked us. He moved so fast like a puppet with invisible strings. Harold tried to fight him off with a torch. Meanwhile, I made a run for Mr. Malachi. I knew I had to get the cane. When I grabbed it, it felt like it was burning my hands, but I held on. There was a huge struggle. Mr. Malachi was strong, and the cane seemed to have a life of its own. But I kept fighting, thinking about all the people who had disappeared because of this cursed circus. Finally, with one last pull, I snapped the cane in half. As soon as the cane broke, everything went crazy. There was a bright light, and Mr. Malachi screamed like something out of a nightmare. The tent started shaking, and it felt like the ground was going to swallow us up. Giggles and the other performers screamed too, like they were being torn apart. I blacked out, and when I woke up, I was outside the forest. It was morning, and the circus was gone. There was no sign of Harold, and I hoped he got out okay. I stumbled back to my car, my body aching all over. The drive home was a blur. I was in shock, trying to process everything that had happened. I couldn't believe it was real. Even now, I'm not sure if the curse is really broken. I still have nightmares and feel like I'm being watched. Maybe the circus is gone, but its evil left a mark on me that I can't shake. I don't know if I'll ever be the same. Some things are just too dark to forget, and some places are better left alone. After returning home from the circus, things didn't just go back to normal. I thought breaking the cane would end everything, but I was wrong. My nightmares got worse. I couldn't sleep without seeing Giggles or hearing Mr. Malachi's voice. It was like they were still with me, even though the circus was gone. I tried to move on, but every day felt like a struggle. I couldn't focus at work, and I started avoiding my friends. They noticed something was off, but I couldn't tell them the truth. Who would believe me? It all sounded insane. I couldn't even believe it myself sometimes. One night I was sitting at home trying to distract myself with some TV when I heard a knock at the door. It was strange because it was really late, almost midnight. My heart started racing. I didn't want to answer it, but the knocking kept getting louder. Finally, I got up and opened the door. It was Harold. He looked exhausted and scared, like he'd been through hell. He told me that after we destroyed the cane, he got out of the forest but had been hiding ever since. He said he'd seen things, shadows following him, whispers in the night. He was convinced the circus's curse wasn't fully broken. Harold had been doing more research and found out that destroying the cane wasn't enough. The demon that Samuel had made the deal with was still out there, and it was angry. It wanted revenge. Harold believed we needed to find the demon's true name and banish it for good. Otherwise, it would keep haunting us. I didn't want to go through any of it again, but I knew Harold was right. The nightmares and the feeling of being watched weren't going to stop on their own. We had to finish what we started. Harold had found some old texts and rituals that might help us. He thought the demon's name was hidden in one of the books Samuel had left behind in his old house, which was now abandoned. So we planned another trip. This time it wasn't to a creepy circus, but to a creepy old house. Samuel's place was in a different town, about a 2-hour drive away. We left early in the morning, hoping to get there and back before dark. When we arrived, the house looked like it had been abandoned for years. It was falling apart, with broken windows and overgrown weeds everywhere. We went inside, and the air smelled musty and old. It felt like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. We started searching through the rooms, looking for anything that might give us a clue. After a while, we found a hidden door behind a bookshelf in what looked like Samuel's old study. It led down to a basement that was filled with old books and strange artifacts. In the basement, we found Samuel's journal. It was filled with notes about his deal with the demon and how he regretted it. He wrote about how the demon had tricked him and how he wanted to find a way to break the curse but couldn't. Towards the end of the journal, there was a page with the demon's name, Azarath. Harold said we needed to perform a ritual to banish Azarath. The instructions were in the journal, but it sounded complicated and dangerous. We gathered everything we needed from the basement and went back to the main room to set up. The whole time I felt like we were being watched, like the house itself was alive. We started the ritual, chanting the words from the journal. The air grew cold, and the room seemed to darken around us. As we continued, shadows began to move on their own, twisting and writhing. It felt like the walls were closing in. Suddenly, a loud crash came from upstairs, followed by a deep, guttural growl. The temperature dropped even further, and I could see my breath. Harold yelled for me to keep chanting, but I was frozen with fear. The growl got louder, and the shadows seemed to grow thicker, more menacing. Harold grabbed my arm and forced me to keep chanting. We had to finish the ritual. With one final shout, we spoke the demon's name, Azarath. The shadows recoiled, and a deafening roar filled the house. The ground shook, and for a moment I thought the house would collapse on top of us. Then everything went silent. The air warmed up, and the shadows disappeared. We stood there, breathing heavily, trying to process what just happened. It felt like we had won, like we had finally broken the curse. But as we were packing up to leave, I noticed something on the floor where we had performed the ritual. It was a small bloodied shoe. My heart sank. It looked exactly like the one Giggles had held all those years ago in Grandma's story. Harold and I stared at it, realizing that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't over yet. We left the house, but the feeling of dread stayed with us. Even now, I'm not sure if we truly defeated Azarath or if it's still out there, waiting for the right moment to return. All I know is that the curse of the spectral circus has left a permanent scar on my soul, and I'm not sure it will ever truly heal. Even after we left Samuel's old house, the dread never really left me. Harold and I went back to our lives, but it felt like something was still wrong. The nightmares continued, and now they were even more vivid. I kept seeing Azarath's name written in blood, and Giggles's face was always there, grinning in the dark. A week later, I got a call from Harold. He sounded more paranoid than ever. He said he had been seeing shadows in his house, and he heard whispers at night. He thought we hadn't fully banished Azarath, and that the demon was still attached to us somehow. He believed we needed to find a way to completely sever the connection, or we'd never be free. Harold had found an old contact who specialized in the occult. Her name was Miriam, and she agreed to help us if we came to see her. She lived even farther away, in a small, isolated village. I felt like we were chasing a ghost, but I didn't have much choice. The nightmares and the feeling of being watched were driving me insane. We met Miriam in a run-down old house at the edge of the village. She was an elderly woman, but there was something strong and intense about her. She listened to our story without interrupting, then nodded slowly. Miriam said that the ritual we performed was only half of what we needed to do. She explained that Azarath wasn't just any demon. It was an ancient entity that fed on fear and despair. To fully banish it, we needed to confront it directly in its own realm. Miriam told us that there was a way to enter Azarath's domain, but it was dangerous. We would need to perform another ritual to open a gateway, and then face the demon on its own turf. She warned us that if we failed, we might never come back. We spent the next few days preparing for the final confrontation. Miriam gathered the necessary items for the ritual, and she taught us the incantations we needed to open the gateway. The night we were to perform the ritual, the air felt heavy with anticipation. We gathered in Miriam's basement, which she had prepared as the ritual space. The walls were covered in protective symbols, and the air was thick with the smell of burning herbs. We formed a circle around a large black mirror, which was to be the gateway to Azarath's realm. As we chanted the incantations, the mirror's surface began to ripple like water. The room grew colder, and a low guttural growl echoed around us. The mirror darkened, and we could see a swirling vortex forming within it. Miriam instructed us to step through, reminding us that we had to be strong and face our fears. Stepping through the mirror felt like falling into icy water. The world around us twisted and warped until we found ourselves standing in a dark, barren landscape. The sky was a sickly greenish black, and the air smelled of sulfur. In the distance, we saw a large, twisted structure that looked like a circus tent, but much more sinister. As we approached the tent, the ground beneath us seemed to shift and writhe, like it was alive. Shadows moved at the edge of our vision, and we could hear faint whispers growing louder. Inside the tent, we found Azarath waiting for us. It was a towering figure of darkness, with glowing red eyes and a malevolent presence that made my skin crawl. Azarath spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It taunted us, saying we were fools for thinking we could defeat it. The air around us grew colder, and I could feel my resolve weakening, but I knew we had to stay strong. Harold and I started chanting the banishment spell Miriam had taught us. The shadows around us began to writhe more violently, and Azarath's form flickered and distorted. The demon roared, its voice filled with rage and pain. It lunged at us, but we kept chanting, pouring all our strength into the incantation. The ground beneath us shook, and the air was filled with a deafening roar. Azarath's form seemed to implode, collapsing in on itself as the shadows were sucked into the vortex. The tent began to disintegrate around us, and I felt myself being pulled back through the mirror. When I opened my eyes, I was back in Miriam's basement. The room was quiet, and the air felt clean and warm. Harold was lying next to me, breathing heavily but alive. Miriam was there too, looking exhausted but relieved. She told us that we had done it. Azarath was banished for good. Even though the demon was gone, the experience had left a deep scar. I still have nightmares, but they're starting to fade. Harold and I stay in touch, supporting each other as we try to rebuild our lives. We know we faced something truly evil and survived. It changed us, but we're determined to move forward. Miriam gave us some final advice before we left. She said that evil never really goes away. It just takes different forms. We have to stay vigilant and remember what we've been through. And most importantly, we have to live our lives without letting the darkness consume us. It's been a tough journey, but I think we're finally on the path to recovery. The spectral circus in Azarath might be behind us, but the lessons we learned will stay with us forever. Even after banishing Azarath, life didn't just snap back to normal. Harold and I tried to move on, but the experiences had left us both deeply shaken. We kept in touch, often meeting up to talk about what happened and how we were coping. The bond we formed through this nightmare was unbreakable, but we both knew that the shadows of our past would never fully disappear. For weeks, I continued to feel like I was being watched. Every creak of the house, every unexpected shadow made my heart race. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, convinced that I heard Giggle's laugh or saw Azarath's eyes in the dark. Therapy helped, but the fear was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. One day I got a call from Harold. He sounded better than he had in a long time. He told me he'd been reading a lot about mindfulness and how to deal with trauma. He suggested that we take a trip to clear our minds, a sort of symbolic gesture to leave the past behind. He had found a quiet cabin by a lake, far away from any cities or reminders of the circus. The cabin was perfect. It was peaceful and surrounded by nature. We spent our days hiking, fishing, and just talking. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of calm. It was like the fresh air and simple routine were washing away the grime of the past year. One evening, as we sat by the fire, Harold and I talked about what we would do next. He planned to move to a new town, start fresh, and maybe even write a book about our experiences. I wasn't sure what my future held, but I knew I needed to focus on healing. As we talked, the sun set and the stars came out. It was one of those clear nights where you could see the Milky Way stretching across the sky. I felt a sense of hope, something I hadn't felt in a long time. We toasted to our future, trying to let go of the fear and the nightmares. The next morning, something strange happened. We found footprints around the cabin. They weren't ours, and they looked like they belonged to someone who had been wearing old-fashioned shoes, almost like circus shoes. My heart skipped a beat, but Harold calmed me down. He said it was probably just some local kids messing around. Still, it felt like a reminder that the past was never really far away. As we packed up to leave the cabin, I found a small, old shoe in my bag. It was identical to the one I saw in the circus and at Samuel's house. My blood ran cold. I showed it to Harold, and he went pale. Neither of us had any idea how it got there. It was a chilling reminder that even though we had faced our demons, the darkness we encountered might still linger. We returned home, more determined than ever to not let fear control our lives. Harold moved to a new town, and I focused on rebuilding my life. The nightmares became less frequent, and the feeling of being watched slowly faded. I started a new job, made new friends, and tried to embrace a sense of normalcy. Months went by, and the memories of the circus began to feel more like a distant nightmare than a current threat. But every now and then I'd catch a glimpse of a shadow out of the corner of my eye, or hear a faint laugh that sounded too much like giggles. It was a reminder that some experiences stay with you forever. I've learned to live with it. The fear is there, but it no longer controls me. I'm stronger now, more aware of the darkness that exists in the world. Harold and I still talk, and we've both made progress in our own ways. We'll always carry the scars of the spectral circus, but we've chosen to live our lives despite them. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that facing your fears is the only way to overcome them. The darkness may never fully go away, but as long as you have the courage to confront it, you can keep it at bay. Life goes on, and so do we, with the knowledge that we've faced true evil and survived. Hello Reddit, my name is Michael. I'm 25 years old. I am still in college, and for the time I'm working a part-time job as a waiter. My friend's party is coming soon, and I wanted to do something special for him. A party present he will never forget. I tried to find ideas on the regular web. I looked on Google, but nothing interesting. Tried Pinterest and Instagram as well, but still nothing. Also looked on Facebook, but like I said, boring stuff. I tried asking people on Omegle about some ideas, but they were not of help at all. All ideas I found, and all the ideas people gave me, were boring and lame, and I have seen them all before. I wanted something extraordinary, something different. So I decided to look for a present or something like that on the dark web. Let me make something clear first. I was not looking for anything illegal or dangerous. I just wanted to surprise my friend. As I was scrolling through the dark web, the first thing that caught my interest was a cursed object, or to be more specific, a cursed toy. It was a creepy-looking doll. The price was not something I couldn't afford. I am gonna be honest with you. That doll looked creepy, and it gave me the creeps even through the screen. In the description of the doll, it said that it was cursed and haunted by the spirit of a small girl. To be more specific, it said it was an angry, evil spirit of a small girl who was left by her parents, and she died. At the time of her death, she had only her doll with her, and somehow with all the rage she had, she couldn't cross to the other side, and she possessed the doll to curse anyone who wronged her or came across in her way. The rage the girl felt turned into aggression, and now anyone who possesses the doll, it will bring a big misfortune to them. Objects in the house will start moving on their own. Light will turn on and off on their own. Doors you shut will be open. Cold air in the room, negative energy. creepy vibes. You know, the default stuff you see in the movies and you hear in horror stories about a ghost or spirit. This sounded fake and it was cliché to me. This was one of the options I had, and I kept this as option 1 for present. Then after scrolling for a while, I stumbled upon another website. It was funny one to be real. It had all these clowns. They did not look scary. They were clowns you see at circuses. The kind of clowns kids liked. I don't know why, but this intrigued me a lot, like way too much. To be honest with you, clowns were always creepy to me and I never liked them. Maybe that is why I was considering hiring a clown for my friend's party. On this website there were a lot of clowns. They were all different prices and they all had different ratings. They had different makeup on them as well, or whatever is that on their faces. They also had different descriptions about them. There was also a filter option, so I clicked on the best rating. It needed a little bit of time to load the page, but after 2 or 3 minutes it loaded. And on the page this clown showed. He had a red nose. He also had weird orange hair that looked creepy as hell. He looked like a clown from a horror movie. I decided not to think too much about it, and I decided to go with this clown. I clicked on order, and it just said, "Order accepted. Your service will be delivered to your door." This was so weird. Like how they will send the clown to me if they do not know my address or anything. This got me thinking, and without paying attention I scrolled to the bottom of the page. With red letters it said payment will be taken like it or not. Payment will happen when the clown arrives. This was creepy, but I was like, okay, I have money. I will pay him. If he comes, that is. At the time I didn't think too much about all this. After 2 weeks passed, it was the day of my friend's party. I totally forgot about the clown. I got my friend another gift. I got him something ordinary like a bottle of wine and a wallet. Everything was going smoothly. It was a party, you know, there were a lot of people. Music as well, the atmosphere was good. Then it was about 1 a.m. and most of the people that were at the party went home. Only us, that are closer to him, stayed. There were 6 of us. We were like brothers. We grew up together, and of course we were close. That's when we heard someone ringing on the doorbell. My friend, let's just name for the sake of the story, Mike. Mike was like, "Who is it now? Did someone forget something?" I swear, dude, this happens every time. He went to open the door and eventually came back. He said to us, "Haha, nice prank, guys. Real scary." I am so scared. We were all like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Mike said, "Do not play dumb." I know, you called that stupid clown to scare me, right? Haha, nice one. Then everything came back to me, like lightning from a calm sky. I asked him with a trembling voice, "Did you let him in?" He said no. As he said that, it was a moment of relief. But sadly, for it didn't last long. Just as he said that, I saw the clown standing behind Mike. I said, "Mike, be careful, dude. Behind you." Mike quickly turned around, and when he saw him, he came running to the room where we were. Mike said, "Guys, if this is a prank, then stop it. It is not funny anymore." Then I confessed everything. I said it was my fault. I said that I heard the clown from the dark web. I just wanted to make this party be like different. I know I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. Mike looked at me in disbelief. He said to me, "Are you stupid? Are you stupid? What the hell is wrong with you? I know I showed you how to get on the dark web. But are you really this stupid? The first rule about the dark web is that you stay anonymous. And you freaking call a clown to my house. Oh my God." As we were arguing between us, the clown started making some weird noises. They were creepy as hell. All of us that were there, we looked at each other in fear. We knew that we were 6 guys there. But something about this clown was weird. He had this weird energy. It was like a bad presence. I yelled to the clown parties over, "Go away. Leave the house or I will call the cops." He said only 3 words. "No leaving. Payment." I tried to push the clown out of the room, but unsuccessfully. He was too strong. He grabbed me by my shirt with one hand and threw me back. Then he started to laugh. It was creepy, weird laughing. And then he pulled out a knife. The lights started going crazy. We ran to the other side of the room where there was one more room to go to the hallway, but weird enough, the door was locked. We asked Mike, "Where is the key?" He said, "How should I know that? That door is never locked. I never lock any doors in my house." I had my phone with me, so I tried to call 911 fast. As I typed 911 and pressed call, it just said out of service. We were so done. I thought that was it. This is the place where my stupidity kills me and my friends. Then he started coming closer to us. And Ryan, he was also one of my friends. He was one of the 6 people that stayed, one of our childhood friends. As the clown was approaching us and coming closer and closer, Ryan just started to run towards him. He was scared, and he just wanted to run away. It happened so fast, the clown just grabbed him and blinked out of our sight. The clown pulled Ryan into the hallway, and all we heard was how Ryan was screaming. We were all scared as hell, but I said, "Quickly now. This is our chance to run." We run straight to the door from where the clown came. On the left side of the door there were the stairs going to the front door. We somehow managed to run outside. The closest car that we had was mine. I unlocked the car very fast, and we all got in. And when I tried to start the car, it was like in any horror movie. The stupid car just doesn't work. I tried once. I tried twice. It's not starting. And I said third time is the charm, and I tried again, and somehow it started. This was the fastest drive of my life. I drove like hellhounds were chasing me. We drove to the closest station and told them everything. Of course, they didn't believe us, so they sent cops to check out the house. When the cops entered the house, they said there was nothing there. So then, I asked, "Then where's our friend Ryan?" Then one of the cops answered, "There was nothing in the house, no murder, no blood, and there's also no evidence of any clown." This stuff left trauma on us. We were all traumatized. The guys, they don't speak anymore with me. We're not friends anymore. To be more specific, they are not friends with me anymore. And honestly, I understand it. It was my fault. Just because I was stupid, and I tried to make something special for his birthday party, I called and hired a clown of the dark web without thinking straight. The price I paid was too much this time. I wish I ordered that stupid doll. Or maybe I should just stuck with stupid-ass wine. And that was the most disturbing story of my life, guys. I still don't know what happened to Ryan. In the police, they say he's missing. There are missing posters and posts about him. I really don't know what to think of this. I don't want to believe in ghosts and in the supernatural, but I think those things are real. So if you decide to go to the dark web, make sure you stay safe and you don't mess around with anything or anyone, because your stupidity can cost you a lot. For me, it cost me everything, so be careful. I've always been drawn to the dark web, not for anything illegal or harmful, just for the thrill of the unknown. You hear so many stories, and I guess I was just curious to see for myself what was out there. For the most part, it was just as sketchy and uninteresting as you'd imagine. Until one night, everything changed. It started with a random forum post titled, "Hidden Coordinates, Only for the Brave." It had no replies and was buried under a heap of other posts. The user who posted it had no history, just this one cryptic message with a set of coordinates. I don't know what compelled me to click on it, but I did. The coordinates led to the middle of nowhere, somewhere deep in the countryside several hours from my home. I saved the coordinates and spent the next few days debating whether or not to go. Every time I decided against it, I found myself being drawn back. staring at the numbers on my screen. It was like they were calling to me, daring me to uncover their secret. Eventually, my curiosity won over, and I decided to make the trip. I told a few friends I was going on a road trip and might be out of contact for a day or two. I didn't want to mention the dark web or the coordinates. I figured they'd just think I was being stupid. I packed some essentials: water, snacks, a flashlight, a pocket knife, and my phone. I didn't expect to need any of it, but better safe than sorry. The drive was uneventful, mostly long stretches of highway and the occasional small town. The further I got from civilization, the more doubt started to creep in. I kept telling myself it was just some prank, but a part of me was genuinely intrigued. As I got closer, the roads turned to gravel and then to dirt. I had to check the GPS multiple times to make sure I was still on the right track. Eventually, I reached a rusted gate with a faded sign that read, "Delaney's Wonderland." It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The gate was padlocked, but the fence was low and easy to climb. I left my car hidden off the road and hopped over the fence. The place was eerily silent, and the air felt thick with a sense of foreboding. I followed an overgrown path, pushing through the weeds and bushes that seemed determined to block my way. As I walked, I started to notice remnants of what used to be an amusement park. Rusted rides, crumbling booths, and faded signs loomed out of the undergrowth like ghosts of the past. The center of the park was dominated by a huge, dilapidated circus tent. Its once bright colors had faded to a sickly pastel, and the fabric was riddled with holes and tears. I hesitated at the entrance, feeling a chill run down my spine. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The smell hit me first, musty, damp, and faintly metallic. The interior was dark, with only a few weak beams of sunlight piercing through the holes in the tent. I could barely make out the shapes of old circus equipment: a trapeze, a lion's cage, and rows of rotting benches. In the center, the ring was covered in a thick layer of dust and debris. As I stood there trying to make sense of the place, I heard a noise that made my blood run cold. It was the soft, distant sound of laughter, high-pitched and eerie. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen. The laughter grew louder, closer, echoing through the empty tent. It wasn't the joyous sound of children or even the forced mirth of an adult. It was something else, something wrong. I turned to leave, but my way was blocked. A figure stood in the entrance, silhouetted against the dim light. It was tall and slender, with wild hair and a tattered clown costume. The face was painted white, with dark, hollow eyes and a wide, red grin. It reminded me of the clown from Stephen King's It, but this one was somehow more menacing, more real. "Welcome to Delaney's Wonderland," the clown said, its voice dripping with mockery. "I've been waiting for you." Panic surged through me and I bolted to the side, aiming for a gap in the tent. The clown's laughter followed me as I ran, high-pitched and manic. I could hear its footsteps behind me, getting closer. I burst out of the tent and into the open, my mind racing with fear. I didn't look back. I sprinted towards the exit, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The path seemed longer than before, the weeds and bushes more tangled. I could hear the clown crashing through the undergrowth behind me, its laughter echoing in my ears. Just as I reached the fence, I stumbled and fell. Pain shot through my ankle, but I forced myself up and clambered over the fence, my hand slipping on the rusted metal. I hit the ground hard on the other side and limped to my car, throwing myself inside and locking the doors. I sat there, shaking and gasping for breath, my mind reeling from what had just happened. I glanced back at the park, half expecting to see the clown standing at the gate, but there was nothing. The place was silent and still, as if I had imagined the whole thing. I didn't wait to find out. I started the car and drove away as fast as I could, not daring to look back. My hands were trembling on the wheel, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. What the hell had I just seen? Was it real or was I losing my mind? I didn't stop driving until I was miles away, back on the main highway. Only then did I pull over to catch my breath and try to make sense of what had happened. I looked at the coordinates on my phone, wondering if anyone else had ever followed them and what they had found. Part of me wanted to forget the whole thing, to pretend it had never happened. But another part of me, the part that had led me to those coordinates in the first place, needed answers. What was Delaney's Wonderland? Who was that clown? And why had it been waiting for me? I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back there alone. If I was going to find out the truth, I needed help. And I needed to be prepared for whatever horrors awaited me in that abandoned circus. After that terrifying night, I couldn't stop thinking about Delaney's Wonderland. There was something about that place that I needed to figure out. I knew I couldn't do it alone, so I reached out to a couple of friends. I didn't tell them everything at first, just enough to get them interested without scaring them off. Jake was the first to agree to come along. He's always been the adventurous type, the kind of guy who loves a good thrill. He's also pretty handy and knows how to handle himself in tough situations. Then there was Emily, my girlfriend. She's really into the paranormal and has a fascination with abandoned places. Her excitement made me feel a bit more confident about going back. We spent a few days getting ready. Jake brought some useful gear, walkie-talkies, a crowbar, and a really bright flashlight. Emily packed a first aid kit, some snacks, and her camera to document everything. I had my pocket knife, flashlight, and of course my phone with the coordinates. We decided to leave in the early afternoon, so we'd have plenty of daylight to explore before it got dark. The drive was long, and we tried to keep the mood light by joking around. Jake kept making jokes about how we'd end up on some ghost hunting TV show, while Emily talked about the history of abandoned amusement parks. When we finally arrived at the gate, I felt that same sense of dread I had the first time. The gate was still padlocked, but it was easy to climb over. The path was overgrown with weeds and bushes, but with the three of us, it didn't seem as bad. We made our way to the big circus tent in the middle of the park. Inside the tent, it still smelled old and musty. Everything was just as I remembered, rusty, broken, and covered in dust. Emily started taking pictures of everything, and Jake poked around with his crowbar, checking things out. "Hey, look at this," Jake called out from the far end of the tent. Emily and I walked over and found him standing next to a big wooden crate covered in faded circus posters. The lid was open, and inside were old clown costumes, props, and other stuff. Emily found a scrapbook filled with old newspaper clippings. As she flipped through the pages, we started to piece together a story. Delaney's Wonderland was a popular place back in the early 1900s, known for its big shows and strange performers, but there were also stories about people going missing and weird accidents happening. The park had suddenly closed after a bunch of bad things happened, including the disappearance of the owner, Mr. Delaney. We were all really into the scrapbook when we heard a noise outside the tent. It was that same creepy laughter I had heard before. We froze, listening as it got louder and closer. Jake held his crowbar ready, and Emily looked really scared. We turned off the flashlight and stayed quiet, trying to hear where the sound was coming from. The laughter got louder, echoing through the tent. My heart was pounding, and I felt a cold sweat on my forehead. Jake signaled for us to move quietly toward the exit. We did, inching our way through the darkness. Just as we reached the entrance, the laughter stopped, and everything went silent. Jake peeked out and his eyes went wide. "We need to go now," he whispered. We slipped out of the tent, trying to stay low and quiet. The path back to the gate seemed longer, and every little noise made me jump. We were almost at the gate when we heard it again, a shuffling, scraping sound coming from behind us. I looked back and saw the clown, its eyes shining in the dim light. It stood still, just watching us. My heart raced, and I felt a surge of panic. Emily grabbed my arm, and Jake gripped his crowbar tighter, ready to protect us. We climbed over the fence as fast as we could and ran to the car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. I finally got the engine started and we sped away, leaving Delaney's Wonderland behind. We drove in silence for a while, all of us trying to process what had just happened. Back at my place, we went over everything we found. Emily spread out the scrapbook, and we looked at the old clippings, trying to figure out the mystery. There were mentions of a secret society that operated in the park, doing strange rituals and experiments. The clown seemed to be connected to these activities, showing up in several of the stories. Jake said we needed to do more research and find out everything we could about the park and its dark past. Emily agreed, eager to uncover the truth. Despite the fear we felt, we were all hooked, driven by a need to understand what we had experienced. As I looked at the old photos and clippings, I knew this was just the beginning. Delaney's Wonderland had more secrets, and we were determined to uncover them. The coordinates on the dark web had led us there for a reason, and I was going to find out why. A few days after our first trip to Delaney's Wonderland, we were ready to go back. We had done some research, finding more about the park's creepy history. There were old forum posts and urban legends about the place. Some people claimed it was haunted, while others talked about strange cult activities. We gathered all the information we could find and made a plan. Jake and Emily were still on board, but we decided to bring one more person, Mark, Jake's friend, who was an amateur paranormal investigator. He had some equipment that might help us figure out what was going on, like EMF meters and thermal cameras. Mark was excited to join, eager to see if he could capture any paranormal activity. We left early in the morning this time, hoping to get a full day of exploration before it got dark. The drive felt even longer than before, but we kept ourselves busy going over the plan and making sure we had everything we needed. Mark explained how his equipment worked and what we should look out for. When we got to the gate, we climbed over and followed the same overgrown path. The place felt even creepier during the day, with the sunlight casting eerie shadows through the trees. The circus tent loomed in the distance, and I felt a chill run down my spine as we approached it. Inside the tent, the air was thick and still. Mark set up his equipment, placing EMF meters around the space and getting his thermal camera ready. Emily started taking pictures again, while Jake and I looked through the old crates and debris for more clues. Mark's EMF meter started to spike almost immediately, showing high levels of electromagnetic activity. "This place is definitely charged with something," he said, his voice serious. He took out his thermal camera and began scanning the tent. "There's a lot of cold spots here, too. Something's not right." As we explored, Emily found more old documents and photos hidden under a pile of decayed wood. They were mostly old schedules and posters, but one photo caught our attention. It was a black and white picture of a group of people in clown costumes standing around a large, strange-looking machine. The machine had wires and tubes coming out of it, and the people had eerie smiles on their faces. "What do you think this is?" Emily asked, showing us the photo. Jake frowned. "I don't know, but it looks like something out of a horror movie. Maybe it's part of the weird rituals people talked about." We kept looking around, and then Mark's thermal camera picked up something unusual. "Guys, come look at this," he said. We gathered around the screen and saw a faint, cold outline of a figure standing in the center of the tent. It wasn't moving, just standing there as if watching us. "Is that a ghost?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Mark shook his head. "I'm not sure, but it's definitely not normal." We decided to check out the figure's location. As we approached, the air grew colder and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. We stood in the spot where the figure had appeared on the camera, but there was nothing there. Just a feeling of unease that none of us could shake. Suddenly, the eerie laughter started again, echoing through the tent. This time it was louder and more menacing. My heart pounded in my chest as we turned to see the clown standing in the entrance just like before. Its hollow eyes seemed to bore into us, and its wide grin sent chills down my spine. "Get out," the clown said in a low, mocking voice. "This is not your place." We didn't need to be told twice. We grabbed our gear and ran, the clown's laughter following us as we fled the tent. We sprinted back to the gate, the path seeming even longer and more twisted than before. When we reached the car, we threw our stuff inside and sped away, not looking back. Back at home, we were all shaken. We went over the photos, the documents, and the recordings. The more we looked, the more questions we had. Who were the people in the photo? What was that machine? And why was the clown so determined to keep us away? Emily suggested we try to find old employees or people who might know more about the park's history. Jake agreed, saying we needed more information before we could go back. Mark was still processing what he had seen but was eager to continue the investigation. Despite the fear and the danger, we were all determined to get to the bottom of this. Delaney's Wonderland had its hooks in us, and we weren't going to stop until we uncovered its darkest secrets. We knew it wouldn't be easy, and it would probably get even more dangerous, but we were ready for whatever came next. The week after our second trip to Delaney's Wonderland was a blur of research and phone calls. Emily and Jake spent hours online, combing through old records, forums, and newspaper archives. They found all sorts of strange stories about the park, from people claiming it was haunted to tales of weird cult activities. Mark and I focused on finding people who might know more. We talked to former employees, local historians, and anyone who might have a clue about what really happened there. Emily found an old article about a group of paranormal investigators who visited the park in the 1980s. They experienced a bunch of weird stuff and left convinced the place was haunted. There were also reports of accidents and disappearances before the park closed. It seemed like something was seriously wrong with Delaney's Wonderland. Jake found some old blueprints of the park. They showed a bunch of underground tunnels and hidden rooms. These plans weren't in the public records, so Jake had to dig deep to find them. It seemed like there were secret activities going on beneath the park, maybe linked to the strange rituals we had read about. Mark managed to track down a retired detective named Harris. He had investigated some of the disappearances at the park. Harris agreed to meet us and share what he knew. When we met Harris, he looked tired and worn out. He was an older guy with a serious look in his eyes. Over coffee, he told us about his time investigating Delaney's Wonderland. Back then, there were rumors of a secret society operating in the park, he said. They were involved in dark rituals, using the park as a cover. People went missing, accidents happened, but we could never prove anything. The place shut down after a family disappeared. That was the last straw. He showed us some old photos and documents he had kept. One photo caught our attention. It was the same strange machine we had seen in the scrapbook, but from a different angle. We could see more details, including weird symbols and markings. "What's this machine?" I asked. Harris shook his head. "We never figured it out. Some kind of device used in their rituals, I think. It was gone by the time we investigated, but witnesses said it felt like it was alive." With this new information, we felt more prepared to face whatever was at Delaney's Wonderland. We decided to go back and explore the underground tunnels and hidden rooms, looking for the machine and more clues about the rituals. We left early in the morning feeling nervous but ready. When we arrived, the park looked just as creepy as ever. We used the blueprints to find a hidden entrance near the back of the park, covered by bushes and debris. It took some effort, but we cleared the entrance and pried open the rusty door. The air inside was cold and musty, giving me chills as we stepped into the dark. Mark led the way with his flashlight and EMF meter. The narrow corridor was lined with old pipes and cables, and the walls were covered in peeling paint and strange symbols. As we moved deeper, the EMF meter started to spike, showing high levels of electromagnetic activity. "This place is definitely charged," Mark said. We reached a larger room that looked like a gathering place. Old chairs were arranged in a circle, and in the center was a strange altar with more of those creepy symbols. Emily took pictures while Jake examined the altar closely. "This is where they did their rituals," Jake said, pointing to the symbols. "These match the ones we saw in the photos." We explored more, finding more rooms and tunnels. Some were filled with old equipment and props, while others had more disturbing stuff: bones, strange artifacts, and jars with weird substances. It was clear that whatever happened here wasn't innocent. Finally, we found a room that matched the description of where the machine had been kept. The air was even colder here, and the EMF meter was off the charts. The machine was gone, but there were still wires, broken metal pieces, and more of those symbols. As we looked around, the laughter started again, echoing through the tunnels. It was louder and more distorted this time. We turned to see the clown standing at the entrance, its eyes glowing with a creepy light. "Welcome back," it said. "You should have stayed away." We didn't wait to see what it would do. We grabbed our stuff and ran, the clown's laughter following us. The way out seemed longer and more twisted, but we found the exit and burst into the daylight. Back at the car, we were all shaken, but alive. We had found more dark secrets of Delaney's Wonderland, but there were still so many questions. What was the machine? What were the rituals for? And who, or what, was the clown? As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The coordinates on the dark web had led us there for a reason, and we were determined to find out why. Delaney's Wonderland still had many secrets, and we weren't going to stop until we uncovered them all. The week after our last trip to Delaney's Wonderland, we were all tense but ready to go back one last time. Emily and Jake had dug up more info, and Mark had fine-tuned his equipment. We packed up everything we might need: flashlights, batteries, snacks, water, and some basic tools. We knew it was risky, but we couldn't turn back now. The drive felt longer than usual, and we were all on edge. When we finally arrived, the park looked even more abandoned and creepy. We headed to the same hidden entrance we found before, determined to get to the bottom of this. Walking through the tunnels again, Mark's EMF meter went crazy, and the cold spots were worse. We followed the blueprints to a different part of the underground area that we hadn't checked out yet. The air felt heavy, and every sound seemed louder. We found a large room that looked like it had been used for rituals. There were symbols all over the walls, and in the center was a big circular platform with strange carvings. Emily took pictures while Jake looked at the carvings. Mark set up his equipment to record everything. Suddenly, we heard that eerie laughter again. It echoed through the tunnels, getting louder and more distorted. We turned to see the clown standing at the entrance, its eyes glowing. "You're persistent. I'll give you that," the clown said. "But this is the end of the line for you." Before we could react, the clown charged at us. Mark tried to block it with his equipment, but the clown was incredibly strong. Jake swung his crowbar, and I grabbed my pocket knife, but nothing seemed to stop it. Emily screamed as the clown knocked her camera out of her hands. In the chaos, I remembered the symbols and carvings. Desperately, I started to chant some of the words aloud, hoping they would do something. To my surprise, the clown paused and turned to face me. "What are you doing?" it hissed, sounding really angry. I kept chanting, louder and more confident. The symbols on the wall started to glow, and the air got even colder. The clown began to waver, its form flickering. Jake and Mark joined in, chanting the words as best they could. The clown let out a piercing scream and dissolved into a mist. The mist got sucked into the circular platform, and the glow from the symbols got brighter before fading away. The air grew still, and everything went quiet. We stood there, panting and shaken. The clown was gone, and the place felt less creepy. Emily picked up her camera, and we took a few more pictures before deciding it was time to leave. As we made our way back to the surface, we couldn't shake the feeling that we had just escaped something really bad. We climbed out of the tunnels and into the daylight, relieved to be free of that place. Back home, we reviewed all the evidence we had gathered. The photos, recordings, and documents pointed to a dark history at Delaney's Wonderland involving cults and rituals. We posted our findings online, hoping to warn others about the dangers of the park. The coordinates on the dark web had led us to a nightmare, but we had survived and uncovered the truth. Delaney's Wonderland was a place of darkness and horror, but we had faced it and come out on the other side. We knew we would never forget the experience, and we hoped our story would serve as a warning to anyone else drawn to the park's eerie allure. In the end, we were changed by what we had gone through. We had faced our fears and uncovered the secrets of Delaney's Wonderland. And though the memories would always haunt us, we knew we had done the right thing by exposing the truth. All right, Reddit, I need to get this off my chest. I'm not even sure where to begin, but I guess the best place to start is at the beginning. About 6 months ago, I was in a pretty dark place. My life felt like it was spiraling out of control. My job was sucking the soul out of me. My girlfriend left me, and I was drowning in debt. One night, I was deep in a hole on the internet, exploring the darkest corners of the web. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe just a distraction, maybe something worse. That's when I stumbled upon a forum that caught my eye. It was a bizarre mix of the occult, conspiracy theories, and weird rituals. I've always had a morbid curiosity, so I started lurking, reading the posts and threads. Most of it seemed like total bullshit. People claiming to summon spirits, casting spells, all that kind of nonsense. But there was one thread that stood out. It was about a secret society, a cult that supposedly had real power, called the Order of the Serpent. The Order promised wealth, power, and revenge on those who wronged you. It was like they knew exactly what I wanted. At first, I laughed it off, but the more I read, the more intrigued I became. The posts were disturbingly convincing, filled with testimonials from people who claimed their lives had been transformed after joining. They described elaborate rituals, sacrifices, and ceremonies that sounded straight out of a horror movie. Then I saw a link. It was buried deep in a thread, almost like it was hidden on purpose. It led to a page with a simple message. Are you ready to change your life? Click here to join the Order of the Serpent. Against my better judgment, I clicked the link. The website was minimalistic, just a black background with a red serpent logo. There was a form to fill out with basic information, name, age, and a brief explanation of why you wanted to join. I hesitated for a moment, but my desperation got the better of me. I filled out the form, lying about my real name and age, and hit submit. For a few days, nothing happened. I figured it was just some elaborate prank or scam. Then one night, I received an email. It was from an anonymous address, but the subject line read, "Welcome to the Order of the Serpent." My heart pounded as I opened it. The email contained detailed instructions for a ritual I had to perform to prove my commitment. It was to be done at midnight on the next full moon. The ritual involved drawing a complex sigil with my own blood, lighting black candles, and chanting an incantation in Latin. It sounded insane, but the email promised that if I followed the instructions precisely, my life would begin to change for the better. I should have deleted the email right then and there, but I didn't. I was in too deep. The full moon was only a week away, and I spent those days gathering the necessary items. I felt like a man possessed, driven by some unseen force. When the night of the ritual finally came, I locked myself in my apartment and followed the instructions to the letter. I pricked my finger, drawing blood to sketch the intricate sigil on a piece of parchment. The candles cast eerie shadows on the walls as I chanted the incantation. As soon as I finished, I felt a strange sensation wash over me, a mix of fear and exhilaration. I waited for something to happen, but nothing did. Disappointed, I blew out the candles and went to bed, thinking I had just wasted my time. The next morning, everything changed. I woke up to find an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a note that simply read, "Welcome." I was stunned. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, my life began to turn around. I got a promotion at work, my debts started to disappear, and I even reconnected with some old friends. It was like everything I touched turned to gold. But with the good came the bad. I started having nightmares, vivid, terrifying dreams of dark figures watching me, whispering in languages I couldn't understand. Then the emails started again. This time, they were more demanding. They ordered me to perform more rituals, each more disturbing than the last. One involved sacrificing a small animal. Another required me to carve symbols into my skin. I was horrified, but the fear of losing everything I had gained kept me compliant. It all came to a head last week when I received the most terrifying email yet. It was time for me to participate in a major ritual, a gathering of the Order's members in a remote location. The email contained a date, an address, and a chilling warning. Failure to attend will result in severe consequences. I didn't know what to do. I was trapped. If I went, I feared I might not return. If I didn't go, I was certain they would come for me. Desperation drove me to post this here. Maybe someone has been through something similar, or maybe someone can help me figure out how to escape this nightmare. I've decided to go to the ritual, but I'm going to document everything. If I don't make it back, I want there to be a record of what happened. I'll update this thread as soon as I can. Wish me luck. I think I'm going to need it. Hey Reddit, I'm back with an update. Things have gotten a lot weirder since my last post. I don't have much time, but I need to share what's happened. After I decided to go to the ritual, I started preparing. The email had specific instructions: black robes, a ceremonial dagger, and a vial of my own blood. Getting the blood was the hardest part. I had to cut myself deeper than ever before, and seeing my own blood fill the vial made me feel sick. I rented a car and drove for hours to the location they gave me. It's in the middle of nowhere, a creepy old mansion surrounded by dense woods. The closer I got, the more I wanted to turn back, but I knew they were watching me. Somehow, I just knew. I arrived just before midnight. The mansion was even scarier than I imagined. It looked abandoned, with broken windows and overgrown gardens. I parked a little way off and walked the rest of the way, my heart pounding with every step. There were about a dozen other people there, all dressed in black robes with their faces hidden by hoods. A tall, thin man with piercing eyes greeted us. He called himself the High Priest. He didn't say much, just led us into the mansion and down a series of narrow, winding staircases to a large underground chamber. The chamber was lit by torches, casting flickering shadows on the walls covered in strange symbols. In the center was an altar stained with what looked like old blood. Around it, members of the order were chanting in a language I couldn't understand. The high priest directed us to form a circle around the altar. He began to speak about the power of the order and how they could grant our deepest desires in exchange for loyalty and obedience. His words were hypnotic, and despite my fear, I felt a strange pull, like a part of me wanted to believe everything he said. Then came the part I dreaded. The high priest called us forward one by one to offer our blood. When it was my turn, my hands trembled as I handed over the vial. He poured it onto the altar, chanting louder and more fervently. As my blood mixed with the others, the air grew colder, and I felt a presence in the room, something dark and malevolent. After the blood offering, the high priest explained that we were about to summon an ancient entity, a powerful demon that would bind us to the order and grant us its favor. He warned us that once the ritual began, there was no turning back. I felt sick to my stomach, but I was too deep in to leave now. The chanting intensified, and the air became thick with the smell of burning incense. The high priest raised his arms, and the room seemed to vibrate with energy. I could feel something shifting in the air, something that shouldn't be there. The shadows around us seemed to come alive, twisting and writhing like they had a life of their own. Then, the ground beneath us began to tremble. At first, it was a slight vibration, but it quickly grew into a full-blown quake. I struggled to keep my balance as the room shook violently. The high priest's chanting reached a fever pitch, and suddenly, the air was filled with a deafening roar. Out of the darkness, a figure began to take shape. It was massive, towering over us with a form that defied logic. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent red light, and its presence radiated pure evil. The high priest bowed before it, and the rest of us followed suit, too terrified to do anything else. The demon spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once, its words resonating deep within my bones. It demanded our loyalty, our souls, and in return, it promised power beyond our wildest dreams. As it spoke, I felt a burning sensation in my chest, like something was being carved into my flesh from the inside. I looked down to see the order's sigil etched into my skin, glowing with an eerie light. The ritual ended as abruptly as it began. The demon vanished and the room fell silent. The high priest dismissed us, saying that we had taken the first step on a journey that would change our lives forever. We were given new instructions and told to return to our homes. As I left the mansion, I felt like I was in a daze, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. Now I'm back in my hotel room, trying to make sense of it all. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I have a feeling things are only going to get worse from here. I'll keep updating as I can, but if I don't post again, you'll know why. Pray for me, Reddit. I think I'm going to need it. Hey Reddit, I'm back and things have taken a turn for the worse. I barely slept last night, haunted by nightmares of the ritual and that demon. When I woke up, there was a new email waiting for me. The subject line simply read, "Your next task." The email detailed another ritual I had to perform, but this one was far more disturbing. It involved summoning the demon again, but this time I had to offer a living sacrifice. They didn't specify what kind of sacrifice, but the implication was clear. I felt sick to my stomach. How could they expect me to do something like that? I tried to ignore it, hoping it was just a sick joke. But then strange things started happening. My phone rang, and when I answered, there was no one there, just heavy breathing and faint whispers. I began to see shadows moving out of the corner of my eye, and my reflection in the mirror seemed to twist and warp. I knew I was being watched. That night, I received another message. This time, it wasn't an email. It was a text from an unknown number. "You cannot escape. Complete the task or face the consequences." My heart pounded as I read the words. I felt trapped, like there was no way out. Desperate, I decided to reach out to one of the other members I had seen at the ritual. We had exchanged glances, but I never got a chance to talk to any of them. I found the contact info for one of them in the email chain and sent a message. To my surprise, they responded quickly. Their name was Lisa, and she seemed just as terrified as I was. She confessed that she had been part of the order for a few months and had been forced to do things she couldn't even speak about. We decided to meet in person, hoping to find a way out together. We met at a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. Lisa looked as worn out as I felt, her eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. We shared our stories, and it became clear that we were in deep trouble. She showed me a scar on her arm, the same sigil I had seen etched into my own skin during the ritual. Lisa told me about a member who had tried to leave the order. He had disappeared without a trace, and rumors spread that he had been killed as a warning to others. My blood ran cold. I realized that if we didn't complete the tasks, we could face the same fate. But then Lisa mentioned something that gave me a glimmer of hope. She had heard whispers of an ex-member who had managed to escape. He had supposedly found a way to break the ties with the order and disappear. We decided to track him down, hoping he could help us. We spent days searching the internet, following any lead we could find. Finally, we stumbled upon an old forum post mentioning a man named Jacob who claimed to have escaped the order. The post was years old, but it included a location, a small town about 100 miles away. Lisa and I decided to take the risk and go there. We drove through the night, arriving in the small town just as the sun was rising. It was a quiet, sleepy place, a stark contrast to the nightmare we were living. We found Jacob's house at the edge of town. It was an old, run-down place, but there was a light on inside. Nervously, we knocked on the door. An older man answered, his eyes wary and tired. When we mentioned the Order of the Serpent, his expression hardened, but he let us in. Jacob listened to our story, his face grim. He confirmed that he had been part of the order and had managed to escape, but it had come at a great cost. He had lost everything: his family, his friends, his old life. He told us that the only way to break free was to perform a counter-ritual, one that would sever the ties with the demon and the order. The counter-ritual was dangerous and required rare ingredients, but Jacob agreed to help us. He said we had to act quickly before the order realized what we were doing. Lisa and I agreed. We had nothing left to lose. We spent the next few days gathering the ingredients, each step more difficult than the last. We had to steal a rare herb from a guarded greenhouse and obtain a vial of holy water from a church that was rumored to be cursed. The final ingredient was the hardest: a piece of the sigil carved into our skin. The night of the counter-ritual, we met at Jacob's house. He had prepared a small altar in his basement, surrounded by protective symbols. The air was thick with tension as we began. Jacob guided us through the steps, chanting ancient words and mixing the ingredients. When it was time to offer the pieces of the sigil, Lisa and I hesitated. The pain was intense as we carved out the marks from our skin, blood dripping onto the altar, but we knew it was our only chance. As we completed the ritual, the room grew cold and the shadows seemed to come alive. We felt a presence just like during the original ritual, but this time it was different. There was a struggle, a feeling of being pulled in different directions. Then suddenly, it was over. The air cleared and the oppressive feeling lifted. We looked at each other, our scars still bleeding but feeling a strange sense of relief. Jacob confirmed that the counter-ritual had worked. We were free from the order, but freedom came with a price. We knew we had to disappear just like Jacob had. We couldn't go back to our old lives, couldn't contact our families or friends. The order wouldn't stop looking for us. So Reddit, this is probably my last post. Lisa and I are going off the grid, trying to stay one step ahead. If you ever come across the Order of the Serpent, stay away. No amount of power or wealth is worth the nightmare we went through. Wish us luck. We're going to need it. Hey Reddit, it's been a while. I didn't think I'd be posting again, but things have taken another turn. Lisa and I thought we were safe after the counter ritual, but it turns out we underestimated the reach and determination of the Order of the Serpent. After we disappeared, we moved around constantly, never staying in one place for more than a few days. We avoided using any technology that could trace us, but the stress was unbearable. We were always looking over our shoulders, waiting for the Order to catch up with us. A few weeks ago, we settled in a small remote cabin in the mountains, thinking it was the perfect place to hide. For a while, it was peaceful. We started to let our guard down, thinking maybe we had finally outrun them. But then strange things started happening again. It began with the feeling of being watched. At first I thought it was just paranoia, but then I noticed small things out of place. A window left open that I knew I had closed, footprints around the cabin, and once a dead bird on our doorstep with its throat slit. One night, Lisa woke me up shaking. She said she heard whispers outside, faint but unmistakable. We stayed up all night listening, but the whispers eventually stopped. The next morning we found another sign, a symbol carved into the door of the cabin, the same sigil of the Order. We knew then that they had found us. We packed our things and left immediately, driving through the night to put as much distance between us and the cabin as possible. We ended up in a small town miles away, hoping to blend in and disappear again. But the Order's reach was further than we imagined. We started seeing the same symbol appearing everywhere, on walls, on trees, even spray painted on the side of our car. It was like they were marking their territory, letting us know they were closing in. We decided to take a risk and contact Jacob again. He had helped us before, and we hoped he might have some advice on how to stay hidden. We used a burner phone to call him, and he agreed to meet us in a nearby city. When we met, Jacob looked worse than before, his face gaunt and haunted. He told us that once you're marked by the Order, they never stop hunting you. He had managed to stay hidden for years by constantly moving and changing his identity, but he admitted it was a lonely, exhausting existence. Jacob gave us some practical advice, how to create new identities, how to avoid detection, and most importantly, how to protect ourselves. He gave us a small, hand-carved talisman that he said would offer some protection against the Order's dark magic. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. With our new identities and the talisman, we set off again, determined to stay one step ahead. We moved to a different state, rented a small apartment, and tried to live as normally as possible. But the fear never left us. Every creak of the floorboards, every unexpected knock on the door sent us into a panic. Then, 2 nights ago, everything came crashing down. We were asleep when a loud bang jolted us awake. Someone was trying to break down the door. I grabbed the talisman and a knife, and Lisa and I hid in the closet, holding our breath. The door burst open, and we heard footsteps and low murmuring voices. They were searching the apartment. I could feel the talisman growing warm in my hand, and I prayed it would be enough to protect us. The voices grew louder, and then suddenly there was a scream and the sound of a struggle. Silence followed, and then the footsteps retreated. We stayed hidden for what felt like hours, too scared to move. When we finally emerged, we found the apartment ransacked but empty. On the floor was another dead bird, its throat slit and a note pinned to it with a dagger. The note was simple. You cannot hide forever. Surrender or face the consequences. We left immediately, driving through the night with no destination in mind. We're in another motel now, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. The order is relentless, and we're running out of options. I'm posting this as a last-ditch effort. If anyone out there has any experience with the occult or knows how to deal with something like this, please, I'm begging you, help us. We're desperate and out of time. If you don't hear from me again, you'll know why. Hey Reddit, this is likely my final update. Things have reached a breaking point, and I need to share what happened while I still can. After our last escape, Lisa and I decided to stop running. We were tired, scared, and desperate. We knew we couldn't keep going like this. So we came up with a plan, one last attempt to confront the order and end this nightmare for good. We reached out to Jacob again, asking for his help. He was hesitant, but he agreed to meet us one final time. He revealed that there was a way to confront the order directly, a counter-ritual that would sever their connection to us permanently. But it was dangerous and required confronting the high priest and the demon we had summoned. Jacob explained that we needed to gather specific items, a mirror blessed by a priest, salt from a cursed graveyard, and a black candle made from the fat of an animal sacrificed under a full moon. These items, combined with the talisman he had given us, would give us a fighting chance. We spent the next few days gathering the items. It was the most terrifying and grueling experience of our lives. We broke into a church to steal the mirror, snuck into a graveyard at night to collect the salt, and tracked down a black market dealer for the candle. With each step, we felt the order closing in on us, but we pressed on. The ritual had to be performed at the mansion where this all began. It was a risky move, but Jacob assured us it was the only way. On the night of the new moon, we drove back to that cursed place, hearts pounding and minds racing with fear. We arrived at the mansion just before midnight. The place looked even more foreboding than before. The air was thick with a sense of dread. Jacob led us to the underground chamber where we had first encountered the demon. The room was just as we remembered, dark, cold, and filled with the echoes of past horrors. We set up the ritual items around the altar, following Jacob's instructions to the letter. The mirror was placed in the center, surrounded by a circle of salt. The black candle was lit, casting eerie shadows on the walls. We held the talisman tightly, hoping it would protect us. Jacob began the counter-ritual, chanting ancient words that seemed to vibrate in the air. The temperature dropped, and the shadows around us started to twist and writhe. I felt a familiar, malevolent presence. The demon was coming. Suddenly, the high priest appeared, flanked by members of the order. They tried to stop us, but the talisman glowed with a fierce light, holding them at bay. The room shook and the demon materialized, its red eyes burning with anger. The high priest screamed in rage, trying to disrupt the ritual, but Jacob's chanting grew louder, more intense. The demon roared, a sound that seemed to pierce my very soul. I felt a burning sensation in my chest, but I held on, focusing on the ritual. In a final, desperate move, the high priest lunged at us. Lisa grabbed the mirror and held it up, reflecting the demon's image. The creature howled, recoiling from its own reflection. Jacob shouted the last words of the ritual, and the room exploded in a blinding light. When the light faded, the demon and the high priest were gone. The members of the order lay unconscious on the floor. The sigils on our skin had vanished, replaced by scars. The oppressive feeling lifted, replaced by an eerie calm. We did it. We had severed the connection. The Order of the Serpent no longer had power over us. Exhausted but relieved, we helped Jacob out of the mansion. He told us we needed to leave and never look back. The Order might recover, but we had bought ourselves a chance at a new life. Now Lisa and I are on the road again, but this time it feels different. We're not running anymore. We're moving forward. We've changed our identities one last time, and we're heading somewhere we hope they'll never find us. I'm posting this as a warning and a testament. If you ever encounter anything like the Order of the Serpent, run. Don't get involved. No amount of power or wealth is worth your soul. Thank you, Reddit, for being there, for listening. This is the end of our story. I hope it serves as a cautionary tale. Goodbye, and wish us luck. We're finally free.